The question that I'm answering in this particular class is, how can you tell if the spirit that is possessing a house was never human, and is in fact a malicious or malevolent spirit? Now, how I got asked this was, how do you tell if your house is possessed by a demon? Before I answer that, we're going to have to spend a minute talking about what is a demon. To start with, I am not Christian. I do not belong to an Abrahamic faith. So I'm going to have to answer this based on different answers my teachers gave me.
So, do you want to talk about the etymology of the word demon?
Basically it comes from the word daemon.
Well, it was Greek, so
yeah.
These are wrong, but D-A-E-M-O-N.
Yeah. And that meant a spirit of the elements. And there were...
often associated with education, but not always.
Yeah, there were many different elements, and there were many different daemons. There was the daemon of the language of the bees. There was the daemon of
often chased by witches.
I want to learn the language of the bees.
Dance.
Originally, daemons could be of practically anything. There were daemons of woods, there were daemons of the household entryway, and interacting with the spirit world was kind of an intricate dance of who you gave offerings and respect to, and who you sort of ignored or pushed aside, and who you had to negotiate with, like, the gods in order to command.
This got syncretized really strangely into Catholicism.
In Catholicism, these all became spirits that you had to control via negotiations with the angels and God. And then in Judeo-Christian culture, suddenly this distinction between a demon and a fallen angel got really wibbly. And it started being that hell was full of demons.
But they were still listed as which demon you should call on to help to learn to do certain things or for success in certain endeavors, but you had to do it by commanding them with the power of angels. It got really weird.
And the idea was that the non-fallen angels could command the fallen angels, could command the demons. And then over time, the distinction between the lords and princes of hell, which were originally fallen angels commanding the legions of the demons, they were no longer fallen angels, they were demons themselves. And you can actually watch this transition over the different editions of translated ceremonial magic texts from the Western occult traditions.
It's kind of fun, actually, but also makes it bloody confusing.
I don't ascribe to that. I'll start off with. I tend to either day by day be in the all of it exists or none of it exists. And when I say none of it exists, I sometimes think that all of this is made by man. That, like, humans believed in it and literally shaped the universe an echo of their beliefs, and it all only exists because we projected it out into the universe. Or
on the other hand, I could say the same thing about the chair I'm sitting on.
Or it all exists. And so
it has objective reality outside of human belief.
Right. The problem is that I don't think reality, like, it's not just whether or not the gods exist. I have the same feelings about the chair. That it's all a projection, it's all a hallucination, and the question is, did it exist before us, or did we exist before it? That's where it breaks down for me.
My personal opinion on this, for the curious, may make someone's head explode, and is that everything, including myself, the gods, and the chair, has the same nature of existence, which is as a non-localized probability distribution, and that the nature of consciousness causes it to collapse into a form that can be interacted with in a localized way.
Chaos magician.
Also, chaos magician of the actual chaos theory mathematician school.
On that note, moving right along. this
math involves gets
complicates things
complicated.
when it comes to demonology and demonolatry at Havencraft Seminary. Because I think that demons include, you know, the daemons, include the forces of demons under Oni Damasu in the Chinese mythology, the demons of the desert storms in Sumerian mythology, like Pazuzu and Lamashtu, like, I think they all exist. Now, the idea that they all answer to Lucifer is where I don't agree.
Although it can be very helpful to be able to temporarily hold that belief when interacting with something where it would be more useful if it did.
So here's that doesn't work for me. I just tend to believe that they all must obey me.
I've been told to avoid megalomania.
You can't be your best Luciferian.
Right. So where it breaks
badly.
down for me is that I've been to exorcisms alongside priests. There's actually a Catholic priest who likes to call me in on things. I should probably not name him so he doesn't get in trouble for that. But
You're a witch, you have a way about you.
right. I've been there when spirits possessing people have straight up laughed at him and been like, why would I answer to your God? That's not my God.
Right, and then
like,
the answer is, okay, fuck you, answer to me. And that's why you have a witch.
Right. And basically he's like, I don't know what to do when it's not a demon that is subjugated under Yahweh. Like, and he actually did, and again, he may get in trouble for this, so I won't name it. He did extensive research and ended up coming to me and being like, Yahweh didn't make the universe. And I was like, yeah, but that happened, and the reason I got called in on an exorcism for him was because a demon laughed at me and was like, I'm not leaving, I don't answer to your God. And he was like, but everything answers to my God. He made the world. And it was like, anyway. Right? So.
I feel bad for him now.
There may have been a crisis of faith involved.
Yeah, he had a bit of a crisis of faith. And I was just like, look, you can serve Yahweh, but really you call yourself a Christian. So if you're going to serve the word of anybody, I would serve the word of Christ. And he was like,
I can work with that.
call ourselves Christians.
Speak so much on him.
With the Christ packet Christian.
Yeah.
Basically.
So, decent guy. Anyway, moving on. I think there are demons that answer to Lucifer and that there are demons that just straight up do not. I think that there are demons that are more along the lines of primordial deities from before mankind ruled the firmament.
They're fun.
I think that there are gods that have been reclassified as demons by ignorant Judeo-Christian culture, like Baal. Not a demon, that's a god. It literally means Lord, or High One, or Powerful One. And Baal was like the first title applied, and then there would be a name. So like there's Baal Ashurat, and that's different than, you know, a different Baal.
Yeah.
Is that where Balefire gets its name too?
No.
Different spelling.
B-A-apostrophe-A-L.
Yeah, it's B-A-apostrophe-A-L, sometimes also pronounced Baal.
Okay.
You can add a ball in there if you want to. I'm not gonna say it a third time like that when we're doing a seance later.
Yeah.
I mean, I might.
In particular, when Yahweh's priests are summoning fire from the heavens, they're facing the ball of war. And there were many different ones through the Canaan area. And in fact, a lot of them actually came originally from the Hebrew pantheon, which was polytheistic. And then the Canaanites and the Moabites actually borrowed deities from the Hebrew pantheon, the Hebrew polytheistic pantheon.
Which then
and
got
then the
trimmed
Hebrew were like, no, we serve only two gods. And then they were like, no, actually we serve only one god.
Ignore that.
And the Canaanites and the Moabites were like, but
But all
We got these from you.
No, you can keep them.
And then the Hebrews started killing them all and being like, no, you have to serve our only one God. And
the
then,
Romans.
yeah. And it,
The rest is history, literally.
no, this was way before the Romans. This was like the fall of,
Just copied them. They were
the
gonna
fall
back-
of the city with the walls that came tumbling down.
Jericho.
Jericho.
I know because
Thank
of the
you.
song.
Yeah.
So-
Anyway, moving right along.
Answering half of the question, how do you tell if it's a demon, is super complicated for us.
Right.
How do you tell if it's a non-human malevolent entity, on the other hand, is fairly straightforward.
Right. It should be capable of communication, unlike something like a hexengeist or a poltergeist. And it tends to make its malicious and malevolent nature pretty damn freaking obvious before we get called in.
Right. At the end of the day, you know it's malevolent when you feel fucking terrified. Like, or when it starts threatening you.
Right. You know, bloody
Right.
walls are a great sign, but please call someone in before it hits that point.
Like, the...
Hazmat.
By and large, if something wants to communicate with you, if it was human at some point, it wants to have a dialogue. Now that dialogue may be hostile, it may be, you know, how could you
led
have
to my
treated me
death.
like that? But it wants
You're
to
so
have a...
terrible to our kids.
But
Why
it-
aren't you taking good care of my dog?
But
It's
it-
one that I've seen.
Right.
Fuck yourself is still dialogue.
But it wants to have a dialogue.
Or it wants you to do something. It wants you to resolve something.
Whereas a
Like, you said you were going to scatter my ashes on the beach. Why are they still sitting above
I'm
your
sorry, I don't have
fireplace?
days off.
Right. Literally a
Yeah,
conversation we've
capitalism.
helped people have with spirits. A lot of the time, something like that you can resolve with a good understanding of a tarot deck or a spirit board.
Yeah. Whereas a non-human spirit that is communicating with you is not a geist, because it's communicating. And if it is communicating in a threatening manner, it is hostile.
So, symptoms of this: headaches, chills, fevers,
Blood on the walls.
nausea, nightmares, a sensation as if your body is shaking even when it's not. Hot and cold patches in the house. Foul smells in the house.
The geometry of the house
seems to
skewing.
warp. Rooms will seem to stretch or shrink or wave. Walls will seem to breathe. Let's see. Food.
Shadows will bend towards the source of light.
Yeah, unusual shadows that seem to move or crawl. Food that rots. Really quickly, the presence of maggots or other, like we've seen centipedes, cockroaches,
Smells, foul smells.
foul smells, sulfurous smells in particular, radical temperature changes, mirrors that are ice cold, doorknobs that are burning hot.
Seeing things in mirrors.
Seeing things in mirrors is really common. Movement out of the corner of your eye.
There's also one...
Irritated, aggravated animals, especially if they're responding where you can't see things.
particularly if they seem to be tracking something.
Shaking objects in the house.
A sensation of unreasoning fear.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, one that I've experienced a couple of times and have also heard other people talk about is the feeling that there is something behind you that is terrifying.
That if you were to look, you would be really, really terrified. I've also had the, if I'm going to look, I'm going to go crazy.
That's a slightly different one.
Mm-hmm.
Also, don't look. Unless...
See,
So, here, okay.
the average person,
I'll actually...
don't look.
I'll actually come back to that with a little more detail. Unless you are prepared to preserve your sanity in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
Don't
See,
look.
I tend to do the, okay, don't try this at home, in the school of, Melissa does this, don't do this.
I've got a different school of Ian does this, don't do this.
I refuse. I refuse to give that the power over my mind that it would need to drive me insane. It does not have my permission.
Whereas something that's been referred to a number of times is that one of the paths that I walk is referred to as the path of madness. And
He's
there's a
like,
reason
go
for
ahead,
that.
drive me crazy!
And so my response to this is, okay. And then I pull myself back. And then I pull myself back into functionality. Whether I'm sane or not is a question of opinion.
And I will say, I've definitely looked in the face of things that don't obey physics.
Yeah, non-Euclidean geometry is weird.
Yeah. I'm like, your face can't simultaneously be that many angles.
Fucking angels.
Angels, right? Oh man, the like folding in and out balls of eyeballs.
Right. Anyway,
There's a
I
reason
think
why they said do not be
I think that sort of covers ways that you can tell that it is that.
Right. So, how do you take care of it?
Seek professional
Honestly,
assistance.
Right.
yeah, seek professional experience. But in particular, y'all ain't gonna handle it with white sage. Or throwing salt at it. Or
So-
praying to a god it doesn't answer to. My main advice, be bigger, scarier, and meaner than it. And do not take its refusal to leave your home as an acceptable answer. If you want to play the game of narrow down what pantheon it's in and get it to answer to that, you can.
Right, that can be worth doing. It can also be bloody difficult. The fact of the matter is, there's a lot of pantheons out there.
And like, okay, let me give you an example. The Sumerians so feared a figure that they would literally invoke a different figure that they were also super fucking afraid of. Because the idea was that they didn't like each other very much.
They were bitter exes, actually, if I
Yeah,
recall the
they were
mythology
bitter
correctly.
exes. And so he would show up and she would leave, and they figured he was easier to deal with. But he was still an evil, possessing, child murdering monster. And then they'd have that on their hands to deal with. And here's the thing. The aim is to solve the problem without making any new problems.
That
doesn't qualify.
Right, that does not qualify. I will say that you often don't even have to identify what it is to get rid of it. So we're going to use an example that our apprentice Tina actually went with us on. We had to go out to this house 4 times, which is more than I ever want to have to go out to a house. It did eventually get resolved. So these people, the husband was an ex-convict, and they went to their church and asked for somewhere to live that would not reject his application on the house because he was an ex-convict.
Right, even with income and deposit, you get told no a
Now
lot.
it's illegal discrimination,
but it
it happens. The church put him in contact with a higher up of the church who owns a bunch of property here in Vegas.
And
I'm not going to say what church this was,
Yeah,
by
no,
the way.
let's not. And he had one to rent.
accepted. Now he accepted rent that was much higher than he felt was fair, and which quickly drained his resources. He did not have the money to move again, and was worried that even if he did, he would run into the exact same problem. Also, a lot of property in Vegas is owned by people from this church, so once you kind of get blacklisted,
Or a lot of the privately held rental property.
yeah, is owned by people in this church. So, they move into this house and immediately realize things are
Weird.
The children's bedrooms, not the master bedrooms, have padlocks on them.
On the outside.
The doorknobs function oddly. You can only open the door from the outside. There are weird, bolted, hidden crawl spaces in this house. There is evidence on the insides of the doors in the children's rooms that
Someone
has kicked and clawed at these doors. There are symbols written in the upper corner of each of the rooms that you can see under a very thin coat of white paint that was put over the symbols. There are symbols written under the sinks in all of the rooms that have sinks. And they say, you know, their next door neighbor belongs to the same church and is very good buddies. And they hear all manner of strange noises coming from his house, screaming, and they've called the cops a couple times, and now they're being treated very poorly at church. They say basically, like, we're hearing weird noises from the attic, we're seeing things, and our dog is going nuts. Our dog is bashing itself against the front door and clawing until it leaves bloody streaks on the front door, trying to get out of this house. And we're like, okay, fucking move. And they're like,
we can't. This is why.
This is why. And we're like, okay. So we come, and first thing, we're like, all right, show us the attic. And they're like, no, you don't want to go up the attic. No one wants to go up there. You get like halfway up the ladder, and there's unreasoning fear.
I was like, yeah, that sounds like where we need to go.
I was like, yeah, that sounds exactly like where we need to go. So, of course, we go up into the attic. Tina and us. This was Tina's first one of these, by the way.
It was a really bad one. There was also the one with dice that I went to.
Oh, yeah.
I did go
Okay.
with that one.
Yeah,
it was not nearly as
This
bad.
was your first bad one.
This is my first bad one.
So,
yeah, this one was fun.
We get up in the attic, which is subdivided into two sections. A padlocked room, padlocked from the outside.
Wasn't there carpeting up there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And a room where all of the wiring that powers the house has been ripped out of the walls and coiled in a big circle. Big summoning circle. And I mean by wiring, this many wires.
Giant conduits.
Giant piles of conduits in a circle.
And I happen to have a reasonably high sensitivity to electromagnetic fields anyway. Holy crap.
Right. The whole attic was buzzing. And I don't mean that in like a spiritual sense. I mean there was
Literally
so much
buzzing.
Power that it was like sitting on one of those boxes that, you know,
that you're not supposed to sit on?
Yeah.
Your teeth were hydrated.
Yeah, it made the fillings in my teeth hurt.
So,
I'm like, holy crap, this house is pulling way too much power.
Go down from the attic.
So go down from the attic.
What's your power bill look like?
And they're like, oh, it's really weird. We get 2. As if we have a second house on the premises. It actually says, like, Unit A. But we don't have a Unit A. There is no second
Turns
unit.
out they had 2 mains connections. One to power the circle in the attic.
Yeah, an entire separate mains connection, like you would need for a whole separate house to power the circle in the attic. And we're like, what the fuck was this priest getting up to? Like, what the hell? So we're like, okay, starting with, we're gonna wash all the symbols off the wall. And they're like, what if that's to bind it here? And I was like, then it's gonna show up real pissed with me, isn't it? So we start erasing all the symbols, and it shows up. It does. And I was like, so if I were to start describing something that's like 8 feet tall and horned, and they're like, that's it, and it looks like this, and I'm like, I'm looking at it, and they're describing it, and I'm going, yeah, okay, all right.
We got the right thing.
Oh good, it's you. Hello, you.
So we start our negotiations, and it says that basically it was offered pain and suffering and fear in exchange for making this guy successful. It would make him wealthy, he would own a lot of land, he would be successful in his church, he would be successful in politics, in exchange for the pain and suffering of these other things. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. He didn't even offer his pain and suffering. That jerk! What a coward! And this big force is like, yes, that is cowardly. I was like, yeah, I broke your summoning if you want to go take it up with him. And it left. We ended up having to keep going out, though, because that much power, that much suffering, that much pain kept attracting other little crappy things.
There were also the kids in the attic.
Yeah, there were also the kids in the attic.
I
think we were leaving those out for...
Yeah, they were enjoying themselves weirdly enough.
There were creepy, dead children spirits. We're pretty sure the dude didn't actually kill anyone, and that they were instead attracted to, the thing.
Yeah.
That's an issue for another day. I mean, how do you call the cops and be like, so...
You may or may not have been a murder.
Right?
Can't prove anything.
Anonymously.
But,
Right.
But you know those missing persons reports about that park nearby?
Right. We did a little bit of homework on this, by the way.
We did end up essentially talking to a police officer we know and being like, hey, you actually belong to the same church as this dude.
And
because I actually knew him from the Interfaith Council, and being like, do you want to maybe look into this? And, he said he was going to. I do believe that he would, because he works for the police.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, moving right along, that got taken care of, but we eventually had to be like, hey, look, you have to stop pulling this much power to the house, because the dog kept still reacting because there's too much power in the house. And if it's making my ears hurt and my teeth hurt...
The dog really needs it to stop.
And they were like, well, can't you fix that? And I'm like, I don't know how to fix the giant coils of conduit up in the attic.
Do I look like an electrician?
That is a call an electrician, not call your exorcist.
Right.
But,
Stop paying that bill.
Yeah. I'm going to share a story from one of our students, and this one goes pretty far into the esoteric community. We have a friend who was being used unwillingly, non-consensually, in a magical spell to summon a demon. And the demon essentially showed up and was like, well, it's your blood on the altar. It's your sacrifice. So what do you want? Rather than what does my summoner want?
Yeah.
A lot of
that
this...
had some unintended consequences.
You don't need to know what pantheon it belongs to, or what it answers to make it answer to you.
And you don't necessarily need to know what pantheon it's from in order to open negotiations.
In fact, part of your negotiations can be what pantheon do you belong to? How do we...
Actually, okay, don't try this one at home, because this one has gotten me in a little bit of trouble. But you can absolutely play well, you can't be that powerful, I've never even heard of you. Card.
He has been smacked pretty hard for this.
I'm still here.
Alright. I think that answered our question. So, I'm going to stop the video, and then if there's any questions from y'all, we have about 10 minutes in which to address them.
And then we're going to...